word preached by Jesus or any of his disciples about a postponement of the kingdom. Look over at Colossians chapter 1 now. Look at Colossians 1 and verse 3. Notice what we do find. Colossians chapter 1, Colossians 1 and verse 13. Colossians 1 and verse 13, Paul says, "For he rescued us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son." What did Paul believe? Paul believed the kingdom was here. In fact, over in Revelation chapter 1 and verse 9, John there tells his readers, he refers to himself as a fellow partaker of the tribulation. Right, Rebecca?
Well, the passage in Acts that you read, just like a couple words beyond where you stopped, said, Jesus tells them, you're going to know what's going to happen because the Spirit's going to come with power.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
This is how you know.
That's right. And it's going to come in Acts 2, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. So why do they look to push the kingdom back? When you look at the prophecies in regard to the kingdom, and you compare them in a literal standpoint to what you see now, do they seem to match up? Do you see anybody right now, taking spears and turning them into, plowshares and pruning hooks or spears and pruning? You know what I'm talking about, okay? So we're all at peace, right? The world is marked by peace. It's almost an idyllic environment in our world. No, it's anything but that. What we see doesn't seem to align with what the prophets have said. But it's only if we take the prophets, what they say, literally. Okay? So when we have that image of taking a spear and turning it into a plowshare, that's the picture. What's the picture portraying? It's portraying peace, right? Okay. Is there peace today? Now think about this. Now wait a minute.
In the kingdom, in the church,
there's peace here, right? I mean, there's a multitude of people. We all come from a lot of different backgrounds that we may not have any contact with one another outside of this environment. What brings us together, what unifies us in peace is the gospel, is our connection to Jesus, okay? But when you try and fit the literal fulfillment of those prophecies and you compare it to what we see today, it is at the very least a disappointment. Now, you compare that to this image. A powerful Messiah, glorious King, reigning over the world. God's people are elevated and established in the world. Which of those two images do you like better? Part of the problem is that oftentimes we make the kingdom of Christ simply to be a body of Christians.
make it physical.
And we try and make it physical.
Try to make it physical, and it's actually spiritual.
It's a spiritual kingdom. And
I think the kingdom that we're actually waiting for is the spiritual one. The physical.
we are already part of the kingdom spiritual.
No, I mean, yeah, we are. What I'm talking about, the everlasting living with God.
Okay? All right.
Okay?
We're part of that, though, right?
Yes, we're part of that. Yes, we're promised that. We have that.
Okay?
We have that hope of that.
So
More than hope, we have that promise.
all right, good.
We have that promise.
We are experiencing that to some extent right now, right?
But so much that was being taught so much was, to me, was, well, like, I know that some are teaching that when it all comes to fruition of all that's been promised, it's going to be back in Israel.
Right, right. And that's what,
That's the physical part.
Right.
That was way back physical. That happened way back when. And it was all that was being taught here, and that we have the knowledge of it. I mean, we have the
Right.
But for us, yes, we're part of that, and we have that hope, we have that promise, but it's a spiritual life.
Right.
It's not this physical.
Right. Not, and certainly not here on earth, as it's certainly not as it exists now. When you think of the word kingdom, and I'm kind of falling behind here. When you think of the word kingdom, what comes to mind? Define that. We think of it, we often think of kingdom in terms of a territory, okay? The realm over which someone rules, and that's certainly true. There's a legitimate element to that. But the primary thrust when we think of kingdom should be rule, reign, authority, and kingly power. A king is someone who exercises power and rule. And if a king doesn't have power and rule over something, he doesn't have and he's not a king, okay? He has to rule over something. When God created the world, who was its king? Has that ever changed?
No.
Okay, so there is, in a sense, a universal kingdom of God. God rules over everything that he had made, and that without exception. There is not a single person, and there has never been a single person who was not under the rule of God. As creator, he rules over everything. And so we find in Jeremiah 10 and verse 10, for example, but the Lord is the true God, he is the living God, and he is the everlasting king. Never been a man, never been a person that God doesn't rule over. Now, look over at Exodus chapter 19. Because keep that in mind, that when you get to Exodus 19, God is still king, okay? But something changes here in Exodus chapter 19. Let's begin our reading in verse 5. Oh man, I'm sorry, I'm way behind here. All right, so we went through those. Hopefully you caught all those while we were reading through them. All right, here we go. Exodus 19 verse, let's start our reading in verse 5. He says, now then, let me just set this up. Where's Israel? Here. They have just arrived at Mount Sinai, and they are going to be camped here for about a period of a year. Moses goes up on the mountain in verse 3, and here's what he is told. He said, now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the sons of Israel. What does God do here?
Makes a promise.
All right, he makes a promise, okay?
He adopts.
He tries to.
What? Go ahead, Sarah. Oh, Robbie, I'm sorry.
Who said the same thing? He claims his rule over all.
All right, and what's going to make Israel unique here? Not only does he claim his rule over all, but he does something with Israel. He commissions them as, yes, but what's the word that he uses? A kingdom of priests. Okay, so what did priests do? They are intercessors between man and God. So they represent God to man, and they represent man to God. Who is Israel going to be priests? They're going to be priests for God. And so in what sense are they going to operate in that way? They're going to be God's priests to the rest of the world. They're going to be his representatives to the world. And so what you have here is a kingdom within a kingdom. That you have God rules over everything and everyone. No exceptions to that. But now he says, look, I'm going to choose you, Israel, out of that group of people, and you're going to be my kingdom of priests. And what makes them unique from everyone else? What makes a difference? They are going to acknowledge what? His rule over them. They are going to acknowledge his rule over them. When you get to David, okay, look at Psalm 89. Psalm 89. What changes? Now, in reality, it does change with Saul, but it really certainly changes here with David. things happen with Saul that they don't move forward. Okay, Saul's a one and done sort of guy. David, not so much. But look at Psalm 89 in verse 36. Psalm 89, verse 36. This is a psalm, by the way, about David and his continuing rule. His descendants, that is David's descendants, shall endure forever, and his throne as the sun before me. It shall be established forever like the moon, and the witness in the sky is faithful. So what changes with Saul, but let's emphasize here on David? What's different about Israel prior to this?
It's a covenant.
All right, it's a covenant with David, but how has Israel been ruled prior to this? There were the judges, or there was just willy-nilly, everybody did what was right in their own eyes, right? The people demand a king. Did God want there to be a king or not? Be careful how you answer that question.
He told them he was going to establish a king.
There is going to be a king. God predicted there would be a king.
He predicted it, but he predicted it because of their failures.
Well, he predicted it because he's got to have a king. Jesus is going to be the king. The reason they wanted a king is what upsets him, not the fact that they want a king. You know, Genesis chapter 17, the scepter will not depart out of Judah in Genesis chapter 49. It's very clear. There intends to be kings, okay? Deuteronomy 17 is, here's instruction. When you have kings, here's...
Whom the Lord will choose. And that's their problem. They want their king on their terms and on their time.
Which is Saul, right? And then he won't even go do battle with Goliath. And so what is different with David is that you now have a human representative, a human monarch, but who's the real king? God's still the real king. And everybody, even David recognizes this. In 1 Chronicles chapter 29, verse 10, 11, blessed are you, O Lord, a God of Israel. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty and everything that is in the heavens and on earth. Yours is the dominion, O Lord, and you exalt yourself as head over all. David says, look, I'm not the real king. You are. And so God is simply setting the stage for a kingdom that will come that has both the human and the divine element, but they will now be combined into a single descendant of David, being Jesus, of course. When we think about the kingdom and the church, we have to be very careful that we don't just say the kingdom is the church and the church is the kingdom. There are times when that is true, okay? But it's not true in all instances. I think it's true in Colossians 1 and verse 13. He transferred us into the kingdom of his beloved Son. I think John, when John says, I'm a partaker of the kingdom, he's in essence saying, look, I'm a part of Christ's body. I'm part of the church. But look at Matthew chapter 6. Matthew 6 and verse 33. There's passages where it just doesn't fit. Matthew 6 and verse 33. What's it say? Seek ye first what? His kingdom. Do you think he's saying seek the church? What's he saying here? Seek after God, and in particular, why use the term kingdom? Seek after God's rule and his reign in your life. And what's going to happen? Everything will be added unto you. Okay? Look at Matthew chapter 8, verse 11.